So who's at the dinner last night? Holy cow! Why are you guys here so early? Weren't you like eating out and drunken out?
They all want to yell at Atos.
Amazing to come here. Excellent. So we had you. Scotty gave you at least 10 cards. They printed 3,000 of these yesterday. All right. This is their commitment to have us help them get the word out. So we have lots of cards. There's more out here. I put some upstairs. The banners are up there. We're getting people to know all about this game.
Yay!
Ladies and ladies, Lord Darkstar.
He's wearing his pirate back
now. So to continue Scotty's boon to help, these cards are going to help. There's going to be a bunch on the tables out there. If you haven't taken them, hand them out to all your friends, all your neighbors, your coworkers. Whether they understand, coworkers probably have kids, okay, perhaps, or the coworkers have parents and everything else. So there's lots of these to give out. 1,500 more of these today. As Scotty said, Winfield, you will give all these out today. So that is my issue. So please help me with that challenge, and we'll have lots out. Take these to Australia, my friend. That should get you through at least a week of meeting all your friends. You have so many friends there. Definitely. So please. We'll start in about 7 minutes. Panel. All right. So other announcements. Let's see. Elwin, did you have more?
Yes.
You want to go ahead and explain?
Who needed or didn't think to take their place maps yesterday, I rescued many of them and I gave them a basic rinse for barbecue sauce. But I do think that in the future in game we're going to have to put barbecue sauce, lots of barbecue sauce on maps.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
So if you left your map there, there's the maps. If you didn't get a map and you didn't go, there's some maps.
Got a little map right now for me rinsing them.
You're rinsing them off?
Yeah, I went rinsed them off.
Okay. All right. Because they were the table map. Yeah, place map. All that. Also, Blood Omen. Is that you? No. Where's Blood Omen?
He's not here.
I don't see him here yet.
All right, when he's here, this is in his jacket.
Alrighty.
Or we can auction it off.
Yeah.
1 gold, 1 code.
I don't think he'll say that.
2 codes.
That's 20 in-game gold.
All right, what else? So who is leaving tomorrow morning early? Who's leaving tomorrow morning noonish? All right, know that there's a breakfast tomorrow morning that's on the schedule. A thank and farewell breakfast is on the schedule. Come to that if you can. Also tonight, if you were not able to go to the play last night, tonight is a fantastic opportunity. If you go there at 6:30, I believe, well, check online, something. I'll have more information. But the Barons are going to announce next year's acts that they're going to do. So I think tonight is their last night. So it's going to be a lot of revelry for this play. I'm going to bring them a couple of bottles of mead for their cast party. They always like that. Although I never get to go to the cast party. I don't know what they do at a cast party. But again, the play tonight, we might be in rain, we might be in thunder, it might be beautiful. It might be cooler than last night because last night was kind of humid. A bit.
Weather's chaotic today.
Yeah, I don't think Lord British could afford the air conditioning in an outdoor theater, but she's done everything else. We could have put the Mad Max dome over the top of it. The ceiling fans. Right. So those who did get through it last night, I hope you had a great experience. Those actors are great. They were at the dinner as well, so great fun. Claire, good morning.
Hi, what's up?
Oh, you missed the sword play. In fact, we have.
Sorry, I need breakfast this morning. Or coffee.
We won't do any more swords. Lord Andronach does carry the sword right now. He is the current victor in the early.
Oh, I can fix that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I choose to fight. No more.
Oh, no, wait now.
He's going out while I'm on top.
All right, once again, welcome back to SOTACON. I'd like to introduce introduce Lord Darkstar once more. And Lord Chris Spears. Sir, Lord, whatever you want. Hello.
Wow. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Big day, glad to see
Big
you.
day. Love your garb.
It's early scrum.
Gentlemen, over to you.
It's early period scrum.
Thank you, everyone who actually got up this morning. Apparently, this is the only people attending SOTACON who actually fight anything in the game. So apparently, everyone just stands around. Everyone else just stands around. And dances. Yeah. So I'm not sure how everyone else gets anything else done in the game, but I guess there's some other ways to do it. So. Congratulations to those other people who figured something else out.
The other kids aren't that concerned about combat being fixed.
Oh, right. So they don't. Combat must be perfect according to those other people, right? Right. Well, no. You guys don't think it's perfect. That's why you're here. So those other people must think that's why they slept in. So, all right. You'll notice that the very top of the list is bug fixing, balance. Exploits and polish. So that's of course been our focus. Every release is just trying to fix as many things as we can, find as many holes as we can, balance as much as we can, find as many exploits and fix them as we can, polish as we can. After that, it's trying to add new creatures. After we add them, fix them. That's kind of the pattern, as you guys have discovered. We get them in. We are a small team, so we test them as we can in our very rarefied environment, which is literally a couple of us who whack on it a couple and move on to our next task. Then you guys play with them and figure out, oh wow, this is really not good, and then we fix them.
Yeah, I just want to comment on some of that also comes from
because they're recording. No, because they're recording it. So you
I won't go on record.
Some of
it
actually, that's really smart.
Some of it actually, the problems come from because we have different people and everybody's like, here comes the release, and they get it checked in at the last minute. There's no time for somebody else to jump on.
Right.
If we push things more, we could handle that. But it really, what he described is pretty accurate. It goes in one release, somebody gets it done just in time, because we're all crazy busy. And then the next release, we have time to go back and touch up. But it gives you a chance.
Sometimes we fix it in the same release. We patch it in, right?
And also, as you guys see with the Wyverns, this release, we always try to make sure that if we put them in now, we try to make sure they're weaker now, because you guys don't mind it when we make stuff stronger. But you do mind it when we go and we make things weaker. So sorry about the Wyverns. We'll get them balanced for this release, though.
The last few rounds of new creatures, of course, were the Wyverns and the Bears and the Unicorns. We'll be adding a few more. We haven't revealed what those are, but we'll be adding more. Then we've been putting in new artifacts. We'll be talking a little bit more about that in the next panel, in a crafting panel, about the careful little dance we have to do with artifacts and balancing that versus the crafting economy. And then seasonal content. The latest round we did were the Atos. They're basically creatures as well. We just sort of put them in a slightly different category because of their seasonal. I forgot to mention the ether creatures in there as well. And we kind of put them in their own category since they slide in and out of the game, and so they're only in there for a brief time. And so we don't really build them in a different way because of that, but we just do put them in their own sort of category and development cycle for that. But that's kind of a snapshot of where we've been focusing lately. Again, intentionally in this list, at the top of the list, has been bug fixing, balance. That's where Chris spends probably 70% of your time, I think.
That is, if you go by, I have 200% of my time available. That's about right.
Yeah, about 200% of your time, yes. Yeah. And if you look at the release notes and you look at all the things that get fixed, the list of issues that get fixed. And one thing that we're going to test, speaking of that, and I meant to talk about that in the last couple of panels, but I'll talk about it now. One of the things we're going to experiment with the next set of release notes, because writing that release note, putting the release post together is a lot of work. I mean, that is an intense thing to do. And some of the details are lost in there as well. So one of the things we're going to experiment, and actually did, I did that experiment earlier this week, and I'm probably going to push the results of that to Dev Plus probably first thing next week, so you guys can take a look at it. Is I'm going to do a direct output from Jira for the release notes and make the release post just a sort of highlights, just like, hey, here's the overall summary of what happened in the release versus this big 20-page tome, and just say, and here's those of you familiar with the process of how we do the QA builds and the releases, and there's a Google Doc version of the release notes that's a published Google Doc. That's basically what will be the companion piece to the release notes. It'll be a Google Doc that's literally an output from Jira. That's basically, it's going to list all the Jiras. It's going to show what the Jira was, what its resolution state was, whether it was a task or a bug. You'll see the Jira numbers, so that's when you'll finally see, like, when we responded to a Jira in the forums and you've had a Jira number, you'll actually finally now see where that was associated with the issue.
And also, for people who don't know what Jira is, since he's used that word 10 times, that's our
Jira.
task and bug tracking software that we use, that we pretty much drive everything in the project with. So.
Yeah, and my initial experiment was versus what usually takes me like a week to write the release post.
Very grumpy week, by the way.
Because I mean, because in addition to all the other work I have to do that. So basically, that doubles my work week because I have to do it like in addition to all the other stuff. So it took me about 40 minutes to do that process of like output to an Excel sheet and then generate an image and paste that into a Google Doc and then publish that Google Doc. Yes.
Along with that, is it when you guys patch the QA server, will you put in what changed in that patch?
Yeah, so that's the other benefit out of this, because one of the big issues we've had with the QA server is because it takes me so long to write up the release notes, there's this huge delay, and you guys are basically working in the dark in the QA server. Like, literally, I'm going to be able to post next week an early version of what we've already done for release 59, and then I can just generate that every few days, just because, again, it takes me about 30 minutes to do that pipeline from Jira to
The third burning code doesn't like it, like, it always says, now updated to 743, they're like, what is different in this one?
Well, that's probably still going to, I mean, because there's still a manual process. We don't have an there's no automated, unfortunately, Jira doesn't have an automated way to do anything like I'm describing. Like, there's no automated, like, make a Google, a public Google Doc or anything like that. And so, and unfortunately, we also use Jira to track things like when you guys have a customer service issue and we need to investigate that. We also track those issues, so we can't. Like, one of the things we were like, well, let's just like make Jira public. Well, no, we can't, because we track like customer service issues, and so like we have like usernames in there and like please investigate so and so's name. So like I have to like go and like filter all that out of like that output, and so we can't like make Jira public. So
I think
it's still
there's things in there like how many times they've denied Winfield, phishing updates.
right. Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
want that.
So there's still probably that we don't have a solution for, but at least you'll have a Jira list, So,
And also there's the Perforce side of things, which another name people may not be familiar with, but that's the version control software we use. And we got to make sure we merge that, because sometimes there's a bug that says, X, Y, Z, but then once we actually get around to fixing it, it's like, oh no, it was X, Y, Z, and the whole rest of the alphabet. And we got to make sure we get those things in there updated. So it'll still take a little bit of effort and maybe a few tweaks here and there. We might miss things, but the good news is, like, hopefully we won't miss any big stuff. We'll at least be, because we're actually just taking, here's a dump of what happened rather than trying to turn it into a fancy 20-page write-up.
While talking about Jira, it might be, a lot of people may not know the origin of the word Jira. It's interesting, I looked it up. You know?
I don't even know what the origin is.
So Jira is from the word Gojira,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is Godzilla.
Godzilla.
Okay.
Ah,
And it's a reference to a competing software called Bugzilla. It's Godzilla.
Ah.
But anyways, every time you put it in Jira, it's Godzilla.
Oh, that's awesome. And actually, there's a picture, interesting trivia related to that. There is a picture of me from the Ultima Online days in one of the very first articles about Ultima Online, and I'm wearing a Godzilla shirt that says Gojira. I mean, it's in kanji. It's in like it doesn't say Godzilla. It says Gojira in kanji. So it's all tied together, man. It was foretold. It was foretold from the earliest days. All right, moving on. All right, so Q4 highlights for combat. As we mentioned yesterday, no decay. There you go. So
Is that in?
no decay. What?
It'll be on the
What?
QA server.
No decay.
So this is
What?
one of those examples of a system that makes a lot of sense mathematically to players hate. So part of the reason it's been around as long as it has, we didn't have a good replacement for it that would work. But
What's the replacement, Chris? Is
so
there a
the
replacement?
The replacement will not be based on characters. The current best idea, there's not going to be any replacement in at least the next release. It'll just be free and happy and fun, and don't worry about that. But the replacement, most likely, this is another one we're going to try out and see how it feels, because we need to supply ourselves. Will be to
Might not like this answer.
will be that we're going to look at the scenes. One of the problems we have, and one of the big across the board, is we have a lot of scenes that you can go into. It's high level, and the risk versus reward is basically moderate reward and zero risk, because you're massively higher than the scene's intended for. So one of the things we're at least investigating is making the scenes, setting lower tier scenes to have a skill cap on them, so that it's something appropriate for the scene. So we won't have if you go into a tier 3 scene and you're in there, your skills might be capped at 80 or something of that order. Now high tier scenes, like challenging scenes, probably what a lot of you guys live in, probably will not see any difference at all. It'll just be exactly as it is without decay. But this will be probably for some of the tier 5 scenes that get farmed heavily. And this also goes back to some of the exploits and balance type stuff too. Because when you start letting people get lots of benefits, continue to get benefits from those lower tier scenes without the risk involved, and you start getting things like something we've seen that we probably banned 15 people for this release, and I'm sure we missed more, not this release, but the last few releases, which is like I'm going to back myself into a corner of the low tier scene, leave auto attack on. I know there's stuff that spawns, but it's so trivial, easy to me that I don't care, and I just leave my auto attack going, and the things spawn, and I'll kill it because it's it's tier 3 and I'm level 100 or whatever. So getting rid of some of that, trying to make sure that there's at least some risk in these lower tier scenes. But anyways, that is still up for investigation. It has not been tested, and I think the biggest challenge we have from the early looking at it is making sure that the scenes themselves are balanced, because we have a lot of scenes where there's easy, what, crazy, tough, hard thing in the middle of it. That may make it somewhat challenging. The other part of that we may be investigating is making it so the skill cap for those scenes only applies to the skill schools that you have not specialized in. So you get your specialization skills, if you're fire, life mate or whatever, then those two have no cap to them. Those will still be max. So anyway, still some investigation go on. The short version though, just focus on the no decay. No decay. Forget about the other parts.
But there won't be any decay. That's and the replacement is, you'll see it's probably going to be Q1 before any replacement comes in place. So you're probably going to have an entire quarter of no decay.
No, I mean it's.
Like if you're 50 levels above these creatures, you get 0 XP.
And that's something we've looked at, but then we got to make sure to keep, there's that for a lot of the people in this room, that could be like, hey, guess what? There's only 5 places you can go, and if you go to mines, there's no longer a good mine for you to go to, because all the mines are aimed more at low level people instead of the big level. So And that's something we have looked at, is making it so you stop getting rewards, but then there's also other problems with that, with grouping, and then we start getting into pushing people into, hey, you're high level, don't group low level people, because you're not going to get anything if you go to their stuff. So there's all these interconnected stuff, and that's pretty much like this talk and the next one. You'll see how interconnected things are, like the exploits leading into economy stuff, and
What about like durability loss on gear?
durability loss will remain. Like you'll still have durability loss when you get killed.
Are you figuring like super durability loss on death?
That's
solved a few problems.
Yeah, that's one of the things where I already started looking at. Right now, I wasn't even 100% sure of what it was doing. I had to step through the code, but it's actually applying 5 points of damage if you let yourself die and get brought back by the timer. We'll continue to evaluate that. That's one, again, as the two things are super connected. All the guys in the combat group, minimal durability loss, and then all the guys in the crafting group and the economy group coming up next, like, why isn't there more durability loss? So that's one of the things that's being looked at, is increasing the durability loss of things. But then also you get into the situation of you start forcing some of those artificial things, like, hey, guess what? Ultima Online was 100% loot drop, like characters you lose all your gear. What did that force? Well, that made people run around naked. The same thing could also come true. The only loss is durability. Then, you start running into, hey, I'm a mage, I'm going to go around adventuring naked, because why would I wear anything? Versus the fighters out there, like their only option is to wear gear. So there's a lot of different interconnected stuff, and which is why we also move kind of slow on this stuff, and trying to make sure we don't completely screw it up. I always talk about the pendulum swinging type stuff, that when we balance stuff, that hopefully we'll get to the middle eventually, but trying to minimize the pendulum swings, because it does result in a lot of negativity from the fans hating weaker things.
What? Mr. Nerf? No, no one hates you. Decay was a big one. We're going to look at the wyverns. They're pretty good, but they could use a little bit of buffing, so we're going to look at those either in 59 or 60. It just depends on timing. Then we've got seasonal content coming up, so Pumpkinhead is coming in 59, and Krampus, and both of those guys are going to use a new boss behavior that Chris wrote, Nearby Power. So do you want to talk about how that works?
Oh, that's just a simple one. And again, we're just trying to expand our toolkit that we can use for bosses to make fights interesting. But this one, again, we use like math formulas. I think I showed at least a handful of people some examples of that a few days ago. But we basically, all of our stats, all the combat stuff, all based off these formulas, and we can actually insert values into these things. And this is as simple as inserting a value for, tell me how many pumpkins are nearby, or tell me how many undead are nearby. And then that basically, all it's doing is inserting a number, which gives us a lot of flexibility in the ways we do things, because we can use it either direction. So we can say, hey, this Pumpkinhead and Krampus, maybe Pumpkinhead is the more pumpkins that are around him, the more powerful he gets. So we just say, we can have things like, hey, your strength is equal to 300 plus 50 per pumpkin that's within 20 meters of you. And then it encourages you guys to go and kill the pumpkins around them before fighting. But
Smashing pumpkins.
Yeah, yes, you.
Question on that.
Yeah.
Say I was crafting pumpkin pie and I got 200 pumpkins in my pack. Is that?
No, these would be pumpkins in the field. If you pick them, then they're no longer counted.
It was a question that came up last night.
You can
so.
smash our pit.
Yeah. So then the other direction on that is we could have, like, one thing we had talked about for Krampus at one point was he would be surrounded by children.
Zombie children. Zombie children, not.
Well, at one point it was children, because
Yeah,
of course it's Richard.
Right,
It turned
right.
into zombie children.
Yeah.
That was actually
Well,
started.
yeah, the initial thing Richard wanted was real children, not zombie children. We talked him into the zombie children.
Yeah. But whereas the killing the pumpkin.
Wait, actually, let me go back. What he really wanted to happen was he wanted Krampus eating children in front of you and then using their body parts as weapons against you.
True story.
Yeah, true story.
You guys are
Yeah. Yeah.
But when when the initial version of Krampus was there's going to be actual children around him, we can use the other thing, which is the more children around something, we can use that formula. All right. We can use that math in the other direction. Say the more children that are around him, the weaker he is. You know, he starts with 1,000 strength minus 50 per kid that's within 20 meters of him. So let's just have two different things. One mechanic where you have to do something else before you deal with a boss type, and then the other one is you need to figure out some way to deal with these 50 kids who may be attacking you without. Is that better? All right, test. Whoa.
Yeah, we're doing
That's good.
Yeah, good enough. But yeah, so it gives you different options. One where you have to try and kill everything before you deal with the boss, and the other one where you have to figure out how to like crowd control kind of, you know, everything else, or keep it from dying, you know, do something with it, have somebody lead him off, and then deal with the boss because he's weaker when those things are present.
Yeah, so the nearby power thing is going to give us a lot of options. We had initially talked about it for the unicorns and the unicorn foals, but we weren't able to do it in time. So we may go back and also add that to the unicorn foals and have it affect the healing rate for the unicorn. So in that twisted way that may force you to kill the baby unicorns for, you know. So.
Yeah, and there's the other. I mean, there's lots of different places we can go back and feed this in, like back into creatures. What do we end up calling them? Reapers. Reapers. Okay. Just
Don't fear them.
Just that's right. Just so you know, they were originally known as treachers. Treakers, like tree creature combined together, and that's what they are in a lot of the data because that's what they started as before they were changed. So sometimes I refer to things as to what the name of the file is. But yeah, having the same thing for those. So like the number of trees that have been cut down infuriates the reapers. You know, if you haven't harvested all the trees around them, then they're okay. But if you harvest them all, then he suddenly becomes more powerful. So again, lots of
like the Lorax.
When does so Pumpkinhead's 59, release 59? Yeah. What is Krampus?
Krampus is hopefully 60. If not 60, then definitely 61.
So 61. I mean, would he end? If he did 60, that ends on like 15th, I think, of December or 13th. So it.
Well, he would stay in through like winter. So he would, you know, Krampus is a winter season thing. Okay. So he would probably stay in through like February.
Okay.
Or maybe even all the way to March. You know, so
it's all about Christmas. Because what says Christmas more than a creature that has zombie children following him around?
Well, it's Yule, winter holiday. You know, so another thing we're going to be, you know, as part of the Q4 is more high-end tier content. So one of the things we just did, Chris and Keith worked on is Owl's Head Sewers. So, you know, we talked about this yesterday in the world building panel. You know, we're going through and looking at different scenes and either where they don't get enough traffic or it makes sense from a tier level standpoint that they need to be higher tier. Like, you know, the whole Hidden Veil needs to be high level content because no one starts there, et cetera. Again, something we talked about in the world building panel. So you guys worked on Owl's Head Sewers, and that's now like a tier 10 with like a tier 15 lich in it now, and like something ridiculous.
Yeah, and I've been going around looking at scenes that are underused. I've redone a few of them, trying to up their power, and mostly I've been looking at, you know, it's mostly in the Veil that I go through, and there's stuff over there doesn't get used because a lot of it was low-end content, low-tier content, and by the time you get over there, most people in that area are pretty high tier, and it's like, why am I going to go do tier 3 stuff if I'm over there at, you know, level 100 or whatever? I'll just go to Owl's Head for markets and stuff. But yeah, trying to make tune up some of that stuff. And this one I actually stumbled upon as, hey, maybe I should fix this up, because I went to, and there's actually some cool rooms in it that are already pre-built that as soon I'm not kind of going around surveying different areas for the dungeon stuff, trying to find rooms I can pull out to put in as blueprint drops for the dungeons. And that one actually had a couple of cool rooms, so and I didn't want to just put it in there with like, hey, come kill this, you know, tier 5 lich that, you know, half the people out there can kill in one shot, basically, one banish undead or something. I didn't want to have it dropping something super desirable like that. I want to make sure it's protected. So when I went and redid everything, and then also turned a couple of the rooms into blueprints that drop in there, so you actually have a good reason to go there. And I say I redid it, and Star said that Keith and I redid it. The reality is I went and redid it, and then Keith came and cleaned up because I just go through and tear everything up. He's like, that's all wrong. And he fixes all the bugs and the naming conventions and the bad links and all that type of stuff. So it's a team effort.
So that's Q4, and then 2019, a bunch of cool stuff coming in. And again, this is a repeat of some of the stuff we mentioned, but now that Chris is here, he can help highlight some of the details on it. One of the big things is allowing groups of groups. So as we make better boss fights and introduce more behaviors and make there be a reason for you guys to have larger groups to go fight the bosses, as we, for instance, as we have this nearby power behavior and other behaviors like that, where there literally is a strategic reason for you guys to like divide up into these fights of like, okay, somebody go off and like smash the pumpkins while we hold the attention of Pumpkinhead. Because if you try to go and do that with a small group or even by yourself, hopefully we're gonna design it so that's gonna be extremely difficult because while you're trying to smash the pumpkin, he's gonna kill you. He's gonna back that. And as we make these more elaborate and bigger and more powerful and try to make higher end tier content for those of you who are getting into your Elder game, we want to make it so that right now, the maximum group is 8 people, so we want to make it so like party leaders can align groups together and then have another communication channel between those party leaders, so you can have groups of groups go out and have larger kind of raid experiences together.
And also make it treat you a lot like you're in the same group with them in terms of like what spells you can cast on them and friendly fire if it's PvP areas and loot drops and that type of stuff. And I know this is also not just for super high-end content, as I think Tazar was telling me. It's also like for guilds. We're trying to get new people into the guild, but we can only take like 3 people along with us because if not, it overflows into a second group, and you got a group of 8, a group of 4, and it's the group of 4 just gets discouraged and leaves. So
yeah, and the idea would be that so when the loot rolls happen, they could share between the entire meta group and things like that. So
we got 2 questions.
Yeah, we'll start over there.
How is the experience going to be split between this party on party?
That's a great question.
That is one we've looked at. I mean, there's obviously it could just be split, 16 ways instead of 8 and 8 or whatever.
And would it be easier just to increase the party size instead of having like kind of raid group parties?
Mainly that's a screen real estate issue, and so our concern about doing that, and we've thought about that, and we've done some like UI mock-ups. The issue with that is, you get into that crazy like, I can't see the game because my screen is filled up with, and so that's why our initial ideas are more to have like a party leader thing where the party leaders are coordinating the communication versus like all of a sudden everybody, especially in the use case of especially for new players and guilds trying to bring new players, and then all of a sudden they're in a group of like 32 people, and there's like 32 icons on their screen that is like, well, I don't know what the hell is happening.
And it's also
will this affect UI? Will there be like one thing that says party group A, party group B, and then the group leaders will see like the status of the other parties? Because I mean, you're going to want to know what the other parties, their health is looking like.
We're not sure. I mean, we literally haven't even started work on this. I mean, this is just like some initial, literally just hallway discussions of like, that would be cool, and like, oh wow, that would be really cluttered if we tried to display every single party member on screen at the same time.
Yeah.
So.
And when we've talked through it before, it's one of those things that turns into what other games have done, some more tactical games, which is basically you kind of think of these as squads. If you have a group of, like you're saying, 40 people or whatever, and you have 8 of those are healers, whatever, and you're thinking you're going to heal everybody in the group, that's not going to work, because it's then like one person gets hit and then like 5 healers all cast a heal at the same time and waste 4 of those heals. The time when you really need that UI is usually more like, okay, we got one guy, he's going to be the tank, and you can click on him and see his health. And that's we'll probably get some more targeting options in there in terms of like keystrokes to slash target tank person and actually have them by name so you can quickly target people by name and have that type of stuff set up.
Or maybe some sort of tree collapsible thing, so it's like, they're like you see the three groups that are aligned with each other and they're collapsed and you can expand and collapse them or something like that.
Yeah, like the skills we have over on the right. What about movable, where you can move the health bars around?
On the list.
Yeah, it's on the backlog.
Yeah, and
we
this
got
is
we got one UI programmer. So
yeah, this is one of those times I'll remind you, like the thing we're trying to focus on to make sure the new user experience is great, and we have some really solid. He's one of the silos that gets a lot of. Yeah. He has a lot of things in his queue that are blocking some things. So.
Yeah.
So how will this affect the chat channels? I mean, because currently on party channels.
Yeah, there'll be a raid channel that'll be everybody in the raid can hear it.
What about alliance chat?
Yeah.
So like alliances and alliance of guilds.
Yeah.
That's one that's still on the list of like let's make more alliance of guild type stuff. I think the raid channel will be a lot easier to get to. In terms of, again, we're blocked by UI usually, and that's something that would require some UI for like here's how we declare alliance of guilds, and you're gonna have to have some way to manage it. There's lots of different that type of stuff. But having the raid stuff, I think will handle the most important, most critical cases, and we'll see. I mean, you guys know how we work. We always just iterate on things, so we'll see if it's still needed after that. Hey, we have a special guest today.
I just wondered if we could just, since that your microphone got turned out, it's static, just coming out of the speaker. And like
it's static on Chris's,
so we should
Chris's mic. He turned the gain down on Chris's mic.
Yeah.
Where does your stream get posted?
Can we turn it down?
Yeah, I thought it was the wind blowing on, which if you saw me a few minutes ago doing this, I was testing to see if it was actually the wind blowing on.
It's just the constant. Oh, yeah, it's pretty.
He has to more logic.
All right.
Turn
So
it down and I'll be better about talking directly to the microphone.
yeah, so let me just go through before we do more questions. I just want to make sure that we get through all these bullet points before we run out of time, and then we'll go and then we'll just open up the rest to questions before we run out of time. All right. Better boss fights, more behaviors like the nearby power stuff, more weapons. We're talking about a new polearm type. So right now, we just have one-handed polearms and two-handed polearms, but we're talking about a third archetype for polearms, which would be forks. So basically tridents. And we're still brainstorming, and we can kind of riff on that live here. We actually had a quick sort of powwow about it yesterday about what exactly the difference between, say, a trident and a regular, like a spear, would be. The initial idea was like, oh, well, like it has a bonus to effect application, it's like 3 times the, it does like triple effect application. Like, well, that's probably going to be a little way too much. And like, especially like if you, some of the newer poisons that we put in the game are already a little overpowered. What was the latest poisons that we put in the game?
That's the canceling the buffs. It's been the one that at least the PvPer has been frustrating.
Right. So, but we were I think one of the things we were circling back was like maybe it does though have like a low chance for a secondary effect application as its thing. So it's like basically the idea is that the main point of the fork does the first effect application. There's a secondary low chance that the side forks could do a secondary application effect. So that's kind of but it has its overall damage output is lower than the other polearms, but that's its primary difference. Is it's a good effect applier.
Yeah, there'll be one of two different directions we'll go. We'll either go that way where it has like better effect for applying poisons and that type of stuff, or the other option that we're going to investigate is making it, and it's maybe the realistic version is making it so it hits 3 times, just like some of the like Vile crossbow and a few of the new crossbows. But make it so it hits 3 times for a little more than a third of the damage, and the result of that will be if you're fighting stuff that has little armor, no armor, that'll actually do more damage than the other stuff. If you're fighting heavily armored stuff, then it'd actually do significantly less damage because you get 3 hits that can each be blocked by armor by a significant amount. So, yeah, more potential crit rolls, more, you know, lots of cool stuff about it. I know there's some people out there using the crossbow and love it.
Yeah, and so we already have 3 of these guys in the queue. So there's the one that the demon has. So you'll get that from. We'll make that a loot drop from fighting the demons. Then we have. There's going to be a craftable, a basic craftable one, and then there's an ornate one from the store. So right now the plan is to get that in Q1. So then we pull on archetype. Then we're going to take a look at summons balance. You know, especially we're going to look at the undead guys for sure, and then more combos. That has been sitting fallow for a while. It's one of the things our system has a lot of potential for, and you know, we created a bunch at the beginning. Ooh, low battery. I probably should plug in, but there are no plugs. I don't think it'll fit over there. But that's all right. This is the last line. And so, oh no, I have episode 2 slides. But
Yeah,
do you want to talk about the combos?
On the more combo stuff, that's another one. We mentioned the silos and stuff like that. Really only have a couple people who can do VFX stuff for us, and that's really what blocks a lot of those, is having more combos generally means more visual effects so you can actually tell what's going on. And first, they were trying to get caught up on stretch goal stuff, which I think they're just about caught up on all the stretch goal stuff. We're trying to make sure we plan those so we stay ahead of them. And then if you are upset that you don't have combos, you can blame fishing, because they spend a lot of work done on fishing and just general bug stuff.
Blame fishing.
But as you've seen, or we'll see, most of that stuff is caught up, and hopefully we can get to the point where we can actually start cranking out a number of new combos, possibly new skills, each release.
Okay. And then some highlights for episode 2. Again, this is stuff we previously mentioned, but just to go over item history and item leveling. And as this relates to combat, this is going to be for your weapons, you know, your gear. So, you know, you slay a bunch of skeletons with your weapon, and it's going to get like a title and a bonus. You know, so you slay 100 skeletons with it, and we'll get the Skeleton Slayer title and get a bonus against skeletons.
And this is also another one of the factors in when we talk about how everything's interconnected in terms of the, hey, Death, why don't we just turn up the weapon and item damage? Well, then it becomes people, well, I used to be afraid of dying because of decay. Now I'm afraid of dying because I'm afraid I'll screw up my favorite sword that I've got, 12,000 skeleton kills on it. That's extra undead stuff. So when we talk about items going away and being destroyed, this is now yet another variable that fits in that equation we've got to try and pay attention to.
Yeah. And then dungeon building, and we're like, well, dungeon building, what's that have to do with combat? Well, the idea for that is it's tied to the encounter rooms, right? So the way you're going to be able to, the encounter rooms aren't going to spawn forever, right? So you're going to need to go and
so they'll spawn forever, but you have to work to level them up and keep them at a high level. So how difficult they are, when you first get something, it may be an undead room that'll be, it starts off with tier 1 skeleton spawning in it, which is pretty important. But then that's also part of the whole, a little bit of a grind for that is going on. Now you gotta go kill skeletons if you want to level up your skeleton room and keep powering up the undead room and raising the level of it, raising the difficulty of it. So there's a lot of that. And a lot of this is we're looking for ways to drive players out for combat and adventuring and doing stuff that feels meaningful and rewarding, and not just like I'm out here trying to raise this one number, like giving you actually like here's other things that come out of it. This one I especially like because it is not just for you. For the single player game, this won't be that meaningful, but we expect players who are building dungeons and actually working hard to level them up. I think we saw that already again. Where Tazar's name out there with his 1,000-point dungeon. That wasn't him, although I hear he has carpal tunnel now. Click, 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 click.
I also hear it's 1,100 now.
Oh, really?
Yes.
But it's something, by putting these things out there, it's something you can do for, it's not just for you, it's for everybody. I doubt there's gonna be many dungeons that are, built out these 1,100 point dungeons or whatever, and have lots of cool stuff in them and lots of leveled up rooms that they're not gonna let anybody in. I mean, they're doing that because they wanna have people coming to play
I
their
think you'd be
content.
surprised by that.
There'll be somebody. I think the target is, we're trying to make sure that what we put in there, as I mentioned before, the creatures will give rewards, but they'll be a notch below what you can get in the wild. So it's kind of, we're trying to make sure that the most optimal thing is not going to be, I'm going to build a dungeon that's going to be, lit room, hallway, lit room, hallway, lit room, hallway. We're trying to make sure that that's not what people are just doing, it's what they're actually doing, because they want their friends to come and build their adventure. And also be able to swap their adventure. Here's what we're doing this week. Next week, let's change it up. We're gonna add a whole nother level to the bottom of the basement. Building vertically or whatever. And as more things come online, like secret doors and traps and other stuff.
So you'll get so just like you're getting the blueprints and the recipes as loot to build the dungeons, there's going to be some loot associated with fighting creatures that you use to level up your encounter rooms. Is that how it's going to work? Okay. Cool. So some sort of like essence or something like that.
Yeah, there'll be another drop off the creatures that'll will contribute, as I continue to mention, everything's interconnected. That'll start being another thing that'll start showing up, just like blueprints are very desirable now on vendors. That'll be another thing that'll start showing up on vendors as farm essences of creatures.
And I see your questions, but I'm just trying to get through all the bullet points before we run out of time, and then we're going to do questions. Okay. So, and then episode 2, a couple other things. So we're going to do some big expansions to the taming system. We're going to make it so your tame pets are going to start leveling, and you'll be able to get skill as they level up. You'll get access to a variety of skills. You're going to have control over those skills, which means that just like your skills that you trigger, you're going to be able to trigger the skills of your pets. So like if your bear has a knockback skill or your scorpion has a poison skill, you're going to be able to trigger that and access that. We'll figure out if that is going to require like another hotbar, since your hotbar is already full, probably. But again, that's going to open up a whole lot of level of customization for the tamers. And then in-game achievement system with titles. So it's kind of similar to the item history leveling as well. So right now, the only achievement system we have is tied to Steam, but we want to pull that inside the game. So same kind of idea, slay a bunch of skeletons, you'll get a title, Skeleton Slayer, craft a bunch of shields, you'll get a title like associated with that, and things like that. So bunch of cool things coming in with episode 2 related to combat as well. And now we have time for some questions before the next panel. And anyway.
I asked this question yesterday, hopefully you can answer it. You notice the community is creative, and so building dungeons appear to be self-contained, and entrance, build dungeon is self-contained. My question is, do you want to foresee a time when you can build a dungeon that starts in one location, and then you have a dungeon that leads out to different lot, could be an enclosed lot, treasure there, do you foresee anything like that?
Absolutely, in terms of connecting them, they will not be walked through. There'll have to be some connection. Here's a hatch to go to another dungeon and make them set up that way. Because if not, then we get into like, hey, we connected all of our dungeons, and it's like now you're loading like basically what ends up being a 20,000 point dungeon and massive amounts of data that sprawls for miles and miles. But they will be connectable, and that's one of those things. If you remember, even going back to the Kickstarter, one of the early pitches was making sure like you can travel via dungeon, and that's something that will probably end up happening through player dungeons. That we're also looking for town-to-town connections, so you can basically have I go down into the dungeon, and that's how I get to our neighboring town or whatever, rather than going out on Novia. So, but yes, absolutely, we will have some way. There's also going to be within dungeons, there'll be teleporters and that type of stuff to move around, because I know that people in addition to guys talking about, I'm going to build out the craziest adventure dungeon ever. There's people talking about, I'm going to build out the craziest party dungeon ever, which is equally as popular in having that type of stuff. So it'll, yeah.
I know people are excited about dungeons, but we're going to have a panel about crafting right after this one. So if we can keep the questions to combat, and then we'll talk more about the player-made dungeons in the next panel. So combat-related questions, and then we'll talk about crafting stuff in the next, and economy in the next panel.
So on item level, if I level up my bow, kill 10,000 witches, can I sell that bow with that skill, or is that still going to be linked to my character? If I sell the bow, does the bow reset, go back to?
It'll be tied into the item data itself. So that, again, as we talked about, like everything's interconnected, there's another thing that players are going to start doing. Is not only is this a cool sword that I, built and crafted and whatever, but look, I've got it up to, +2 on this thing because it's gone out and fought, and I've never damaged it. I've never died with it a bunch, so the durability on it. So it's going to be another thing that'll add to the marketability of an item.
And you can level up packs and then sell packs, level up.
Yeah. And those will be kind of two different things. The item, we'll be getting it built into the item. The creature is the same thing. We hope to get that built into the creature as well. You can not just tame heads, but then take them out and do stuff with them and make them more powerful.
We got a question right here.
So I'm sure this has come up before. I just haven't heard anything about it. I'd just like to know like where your head's at on it. But as far as like combat, UI, and everything goes, I would love to have a lot of the draggable, whatever, all sorts of cool stuff. And you're talking about the UI backlog, one UI programmer. Have you guys thought about opening it up, making it moddable, giving us like a Lua or Python interface to, because the community, there's a lot of technical people we all know that would love to help out.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this before. That's one of the things that's been high on my list, that is getting the UI moddable. Because even in games, if you look at like WoW, like they've got a pretty decent team size on World of Warcraft and some of these other massive games out there. But the best UIs still come from the end players, no matter how good we think we are at things. The players are always the one who are in the trenches and actually using it and know what frustrates them and can work around it and evolve. And it is something that I would love to use. We do actually, I have integrated Lua into our project in the past. The big challenge is also, as you've seen with WoW and other games, just like, hey, here's stuff, go do things with it. And the first thing is, of course, hey, who's going to make ways that we can use this for exploiting and macroing and, don't worry about actually fighting, just press this one button over and over again, and every time they try to work out something. So we're trying to make sure we don't rush it on that, but I would love to get that out there because, as we've said, our UI programmers overburdened. And I agree, you guys will do a much better job of making, if not prettier stuff, hopefully we can do prettier stuff, but you guys will make probably more functional stuff if you know how you're going to be using things. So the Lua stuff is where I hope it will go. A lot of support for that. It's a really tight, small library. It's not something that needs to be graphics intensive because really doesn't need to be optimized because the actual work is happening in the game and in the engine. Going for Lua, you're just kind of doing some simple logic and pushing stuff around and setting up data and calling functions. But again, that's the whole thing. It's like, what functions do we expose to you and what do we allow you to do? So, yeah. Thanks.
So with the pet leveling and skills, would it be possible that we could train a pet, say, in 3 skills? If my spec is in taming, right, and I wanted my bear to learn how to heal or do poison, could we be able to put that into where we could train them in the skills that we want that creature to do?
Again, super, we haven't even started on the system, so it's just general ideas, but the idea would be the skill sets would be tied to the creature type. So like a bear is not really a healing type creature, right? It would have a set of, it's a Care Bear. But it would have more like a set of skills, like a knockback, like a bite with maybe that would have a bleed out. Yeah, but the big expansion to it is that you would have control over when he would trigger those attacks, whereas right now all that's determined by a set of AI behavior scripts. And so the big expansion to it is when, make that more of a tree that you get access to as the pet level goes up, and you get to trigger those during combat. You could still put it sort of on autopilot, but you could also have a mode where you're triggering those things. But having, I mean, yeah, it really wouldn't make sense to have the, like, well, but maybe there is a new creature type, like a little koala, that is a healing bear, That was for you, man, koala bear. Healing koala bear.
And it'll still be true that I think I've seen some people now where like someone pull out a pet and say, look, my 2,600 hit point bear, and then you give it to somebody else, they sell it to somebody else, and it's like this bear has 1,200 hit points for me. It'll still be true that your taming skills will be a big factor in that, and it may open up other skills. So we'll see. They may have to be taming specialized to actually get somebody those features.
Right.
So
I have taming spec,
yeah.
right? I'm in taming spec.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when I go out and I'm fighting on my own, I just have to use water elements because I need a healer with me, and I can't actually use my pet.
Right now that is one hole in taming, is that there's no creature you can go out and tame that has any healing thing. So we probably. Oh. Yeah. One thing that is part of this that we haven't mentioned ever before, which I guess we can mention now, is like one of the things we want to be able to do is have a way as part of this taming expansion is to take non-combat pets and use the taming system to convert them into combat pets. So you could take, like, for instance, like your lynx or your dog, or your dragonfly or butterfly, and turn those into a combat version. That's one of the things we've talked about. So that would be a way, they would easily add like a healing creature into that with not a lot of the associated work of like having to go out and add a bunch of spawns in the world and things like that. It's like, and there's a whole, and that would also at the same time all of a sudden create a bunch of visual variety and all these non-combat pets that are kind of like, all of a sudden they would have a real use. So that's one of the things we've discussed as a potential issue, and like Travis said, combat kitties. That's true, yeah. All right, yes.
Are there any plans to balance bludgeon further? I have several guildies, I'm still a tenderfoot, who use bludgeon a lot in PVE, and some do in PvP, even though it's losing battle. Are you gonna do something about it?
I'll keep looking at bludgeon. It's one of those that I point at as we don't want all of them to be equal in all ways in terms of like bludgeon. I don't expect it to be the same DPS as blades or something like that. It's not going to be balanced that way. The way that we balance those things is I'm trying to make sure that there's a purpose for it and goal. But the bludgeon, more than any of the other ones, is one that it's super useful. Really, it's super useful if you're in a party with other guys who are tanks and healers, just because it does add new debuffs that'll stack with everybody else and help everybody in the party. So again, as I always mention, like apples to oranges, I try to make sure it's not apples to apples. I'm trying to make sure it's not bludgeon DPS. I promise it'll be the same DPS as blades, which will be the same DPS as polearms. I'm trying to make sure each one has their own strengths and weaknesses. The metrics shown, again, some of this may be because it is really, it feels balanced to me, but only in a big party situation. And we want to make sure that there's some ways that it can be useful for soloing and other things. It's not just this one niche group of people who like to play with their friends. But yes, I'll continue to take a look at it. It's the #1 on my list right now for things to take a look at. Now that polearms are down a little bit and being, oh my god, crazy overpowered, blades are still feeling pretty good. And I kind of use blades as here's my benchmark. I'm trying to set the others too. So if you see blades doesn't get much change applied to it, that's because I kind of consider it like here's the gold standard, and I want to make sure that bludgeon is equally useful as blades in some way. Polearm, same thing, and then archery is kind of a halfway between melee and spell type stuff, so it's kind of a tough one to figure out what the exact balance is. So, Yes, I will be taking a look at it further to make sure it's a little more effective, primarily for the solo attacks. So there's some better options for people who don't want to just be a partner all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I actually have two questions related to the pet stuff. One of them more technical, one of them is more gameplay related. On the gameplay side, will a lot of that stuff also apply in some way to the summon pets? And the other thing is, since you're having to eliminate that AI loop, is that going to improve performance somewhat?
Well, again, we wouldn't be eliminating the AI loop. Like, so that would still be an option for you to have your pet do his behaviors on his own. We're just giving you the option to also be able to trigger them yourself.
Yeah, and as for the AI side of things, pets are actually, if you look at, they're really low, even though they're an AI, just because of their behaviors and the way they're set up. The only thing costly with them is they follow you around wherever you go, and doing that navigation logic is a little costly, but we actually have those set up so they're doing very short movements because they're really just following you. And then also we got, like, as soon as we switched and did a little tuning on the, if he falls too far behind, you go somewhere he can't, he does like a teleport to you type thing. They're really not that bad on AI.
Question right here,
Wanted to see if Chris or Travis wanted to comment on the challenges of balancing PvP without overriding creating issues on PvM, and any thoughts to overcome that?
It is challenging. I mean, that's one of those things I talked about is if you want to look at a challenging system in addition to the, hey, there's no classes, build whatever you want to, you got to balance all that. And then as we hear, like, you know, even with that, like the trees, like trying to balance Bludgeon versus everything else. I don't think Bludgeon is effective in PvP right now. The number one thing, I try to look at both sides of things. I try to make sure I don't make PvP specific changes that impact PvE in a negative way, just because I do think PvE is a little more balanced than PvP right now. But that's generally because you're fighting creatures and, you know, you're the only intelligence involved in it. I mean, they've got some artificial intelligence in what they're doing, but really it's more planned and strategic type stuff and just like picking the right thing for the right time, and a lot of it is random. But when you're in PvP, it's like you're versus another player, and players are always looking for the how can I win, and it's also players in PvP are way more competitive in certain min-maxing, ranking things just right, because they want to win. They don't care about like killing a creature, whatever, anybody can do that. When it's me versus somebody else, only one of us is winning, and I want to be that guy who wins. It's like when you're versus creatures, it's like I'm going to win 9,999 times out of 10,000. But PvP, it's always one win, one loss type stuff, so they're way more competitive than that. But I do try to keep all that stuff in mind, and when I look at changes, I try to look at both sides. I do make some changes, though, that are to fix something in PvP that impact PvE, but I try to make sure that the impact is minimal. I do keep an eye on that. There you have some.
Yeah, there is a difference between PvE. If we know when a player is being damaged by a monster or a player, and Chris does a good job of, well, we want to change this, but we know, for instance, heal spec, you can't take down a heal spec if they're high PvP. So I just mentioned, you know, we need to nerf that for PvP, but not have that effect. So there's things we can do like flags for if you've been fighting another player, then it affects that for the last whatever 30 seconds or whatever. Or so there is, it does differentiate between player versus player damage in the code. I guess it knows the difference, so we can make tweaks to like crits versus a player versus crits versus a monster. So sometimes we can balance one without actually affecting PvE at all.
And I think most people know I rarely make big changes without talking to players about it first. In fact, for what he just talked about, I think Justin and some others were in there, and I had a couple of healers in front of me, and I was like, what do you guys think about? And they immediately threatened to kill me, which was to make it so, what do you guys think about your heal spells doing less for you? They'll still help your party just as much, but for you, they'll do a little bit less, and they immediately kill me. But that also leads to other big talks about, like, let me look at the aggro for healers. Why are you guys able to pull heals so much? Run into several issues. Yeah. Yeah, and that actually, in case you didn't hear, that was if I cast an 800 hit point heal on you and you're only down 100 health, I still get aggro as if I healed you for 800. So addressing that, and then also addressing the amount that the heal gives per point of point. But anyways, I always talk to you guys because it's not only am I trying to make sure I'm not going to, piss off one group or the other, but try to make sure it's balanced. And you guys are the ones who know more. But of course, I always do have to weigh the whole everybody fights for what they want type of stuff, and I try to make sure I don't just let people badger me into making specific changes.
Yeah,
Next.
Blame fishing. There we go. I'm fascinated and inspired by the group combat focus that you guys have going on, and the flexibility I hope you'll have. For example, in group combat, how about we can form shield walls with people with shields, and it'll keep the bad guys out while the archers behind are able to do that. Can we do that now?
You need to come with us.
All right, I need to stop fishing and go do stuff like that. Blame fishing. That's why I never get out.
There's some. One of the things that is cool on paper, the cool thing about and talk about is having I can completely block these creatures. That is a nightmare. Having you physically block them in a hallway with your shields or whatever. That is a nightmare in terms of how to balance that for us. If your archers can shoot through you, and then you also get into the whole well, you're saying you want to be able to physically block the creatures by putting two guys with shields in this hallway, but your archer's going to shoot arrows right through your back. So you want your physical side of things to work, but not our physical side of things. But really, the result would be AI that's not fun because it is massively exploitable. So
realism
we
is
do
a
have
point
some
there.
of it. It's not all there. It's not. We don't have it physical.
There's probably something we'd like to see creatures do in the future too. That's a little more.
Yeah. And on the PvP side of things, that's another one you can, because you can block people and block hallways, and that's, I'm sure with dungeons that'll be something that comes up. It's hey, you can block someone in a dungeon if you're both PvP and stand in the hallways. Because I'm sure also that'll be the new type, hopefully, of dungeon that will show up. It's not just a party dungeon or a adventure dungeon. You go and rebuild, but also here's a PvP dungeon. We're going to rebuild for tournaments and events and that type of stuff.
I'd like to see one where everyone has permissions and they're building walls and taking other people's walls.
Another question here.
Have you given any consideration to a combat mechanic for pass-through targeting, my targets?
Target, yes. And I don't know why we haven't got that. That's what I was just talking about, making sure we have a way we can set up macros for you guys, so you can do /target, Taser or whatever, and you can always, that's something that's going to be super important with the ranks and stuff like that, but also making sure, that I can target star and do /target, because that's another one strategy in a lot of games is for the healers and other people. The tank, he's the lead tank. Everybody's on his target. You need to be able to target him and target his target. And same thing with heals is, I need to see who that person's healing at the time.
And the inverse of that too is nice sometimes to be able to see monsters on targets.
Target.
One more question.
And that's also not difficult. I'm not sure. I think that's one of those just slipped through the crack. I've known it's something we wanted. I'll try to make sure we get that in possibly for our 59, because that's when I can do myself.
On the
internet.
On the topic of heals, you said /star, but it would be great if when you did, I played MUDs, and if you type a name and there's only one person with the first 4 letters, it'll actually message them directly or target them directly. So if I want to heal Cesar, and who can pronounce his last name for us and spell it? SothacoN, yeah. So, there's a lot of clicks in that name, and so it's difficult to target. Or if you want to wave at this person, you can't type / wave. It'd be nice if it was somehow predictive. Not feeling at all, just take the first alphabetically correct case of those 4 letters.
Yeah, and of course that's one of those things. We could probably do it for your own group members fairly easy.
But not a scene.
But for the scene, you don't always even have your local client who's in the scene with you. And as I've gone through logs in the past, and I see how players use some of those same type of mechanics and other stuff. For instance, I was trying to track down what is this guy doing? Because I've had some complaints on him, and I would go and search the logs for him. and it's like, what the hell is going on here? Because there's like 10 different players who just randomly say this guy's name about every 2 minutes. And of course, that was back when you could say their name and see if they were in scene with the PvP type stuff. So it's the same type of stuff we've got to be careful about.
Okay.
Well, if everybody, was super great and didn't do that type of stuff, it's kind of this is why we can't have nice things type thing. We can't allow that type of stuff for in groups, and that's one of those things we should probably take a look at is making it safe.
So that wasn't my question. My question was just, is the sort of the swashbuckler still going out to people based on the Blood Bay and people are signing lots, or is that on
Yes,
hold?
and that's one of the many things that I've kind of put aside, and Travis also, as we try to get ready for this new user experience. I think that's fun, and it's not that much work on our part, but number one by a million miles in terms of what I believe PvP needs and Blood Bay needs is more blood in the form of more people.
Well, something like that sort of be awesome for governors who are running from one side of the town to the other.
Yeah.
All the time. Just-
All right. Break time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the combat panel. We're going to have a panel in about 10 minutes for crafting. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff. Fishing and player dungeons are going to be the two big highlights of that. So join us in about 10 minutes. Thanks.
There's also a bunch of tacos up on the shelves over there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Well, PK's taken care of. So again, that's what I look at right now. It's hard to